All right, so welcome to Studied That Doing This, a show for graduates and soon-to-be graduates considering a non-traditional career path. My name is Tam, and like so many professionals, I ended up working in a completely different field than I originally started out in. And back when I was about to graduate, I know it would have been very reassuring to know that that is totally fine and possible. And so I decided to create an interview series where I talked to professionals who successfully transitioned into not so obvious roles given their degrees. Which brings me to today's guest, Jessica Henig, Director of Partnerships at Partnerize. Welcome, Jessica.
Thanks for having me, Tam.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And agreeing to share your story. Maybe we could just kick this off with telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from originally, where you live now, what you do, and of course, what you studied.
Sure. I'm based on Long Island, actually, in New York. I grew up out here, but never actually thought I'd stay living out here. I always thought I was going to transition to the West Coast somewhere, and I did for a while. Just kept getting jobs back here that were, better paying and all that jazz. So,
Right.
yeah, wound up staying in New York. So I'm here now. I am working currently at Partnerize, like you said, director of partnerships. It's a global tech company, which is very exciting to me. I've always wanted to, be closer to technology. So I focus on the partnerships in the U.S. market. I'm part of a global team, which is, also makes it very exciting.
Yeah.
And my focus is really bringing new publishers and partners onto the platform and connecting them with our great brands and helping them all generate revenue.
Cool.
Yeah.
And so most important question for today's talk, what did you study originally and like how did you get to where you are now?
So I studied music industry, which is it always throws everybody for a loop now in this industry. But I actually started going for music education at Monmouth University. And I realized within the first 2 years, I was like, I am a horrible teacher. I definitely don't have patience. And, but I'm totally drawn to the business side. So I took a look at my classes and the scheduling and all. And I realized if I made the transfer like right away, I could have like kind of an even trade in the number of classes. So
Right.
I made the switch very quickly from education over to industry and never looked back.
Okay. And so, but you started out in music education. What was your initial plan? Like, were you thinking, oh, I am going to be a teacher, or did you just kind of go with something you were interested in, but not really have a career trajectory planned out?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So I always had a thought that I was going to be in music. Like since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be in the music industry somehow.
Yeah.
I just always expected it was going to be education because on Long Island, there's a big community of teachers and of police officers, basically. So most families, you're a teacher and a police officer. So you just grow up thinking like, I'm going to probably be a teacher or a police officer. So I assumed if I wanted to stay in music, that cuts out the police officer, and
Right.
I would, go into music education. It just seemed like the most obvious path, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And you already said, so you realized when you were studying that teaching wasn't for you, but like, was there any specific turning point where you could say, oh, that's when it hit me that the industry or the business side is more my thing?
Yeah, two things. So one was one of my classes, they had us do like a mock teaching experiment. So the rest of the class acts as if they're a certain age of student. So I
Right.
think I had to do like second or third graders or something. So they're all acting like second and third graders. And I was like, oh God, I hate this so much. Like, I don't want to tell them what to do. I just wish they would sit and listen. And I
Yeah.
was like, okay, this is definitely not for me. I don't enjoy this. And then I started realizing what I like about anything I do is the business side. I love the numbers and I love trying to figure out the problems of how to get more, how to do more. Um, so I started going in that direction of like, looking at the people who were taking the industry classes and what are they doing? What is their day to day like? And it was so much more interesting
Right.
to me,
Okay.
at least.
Um, so I'm going to ask you about transferable skills in a moment, but since you you switched classes and then took more sort of businessy classes, but you still have the music background. When you first started out looking for your first jobs, like when you were a fresh graduate, did this come up? Like, did you have to explain why you didn't do business, like why music, and were you how did you convince them that like that's an asset?
Well, so this is like when I transitioned like out of the music industry. Yeah.
Well, more into business, but I mean, you still have a degree that's focused on music industry. Like, how did you bring that into the conversation? Like when you interviewed, for instance?
Yeah. So it was, I feel like I got lucky actually. So I was taking a little bit of time off. I had had a couple of jobs in a row that were just so stressful, and I was like just tapped out. And I didn't want to go back to the same type of a role. So I was trying to figure out like, what do I do next? And I wound up working with a couple of recruiters that I got connected to, and one of them sent me a job description with no company name attached to it. So
Okay.
I was reading this job description as almost like a list of things I already know how to do well. So I was like, oh, I could do this job. What could it possibly be? It's probably in music somewhere because they know I'm in music. And it wound up actually being in publishing, which I don't know anything about. And
Okay.
yeah, it was, I almost was like, wow, I can't believe you'd consider me for this. But when you look at just the straight up requirements of a job, it's so simple. What, like when it comes to you in that way, it's, do you work cross functionally across teams? Do you know how to, work in Excel? Like it's,
Right. Yeah.
very standard things that you're like, oh, it doesn't matter if it's music or not. It actually matters. Can I do this job well? And would I enjoy it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So then ultimately what it came down to for me was the people I work with. So I met, the first interview, met a couple of people, they walked me around the floor, and I just had a great vibe from the entire place. And I was like, okay, it's a different group of people, but it's still great people. And
Right.
that kind of just made me move.
It's so interesting that you didn't know what the job was and kind of figured, oh, this is something I've done before, but then
Yeah,
really, so completely different industry, but the way you work was similar in that case, which is
exactly.
fascinating. But so now when we go into the transferable skills, so are there particular things from your studies, either in music industry or music education for that matter, that you can really use in your day-to-day that you say like, it's really good that I actually studied that, even though I didn't know this is what it would lead to?
Right. Well, I mean, Monmouth was, especially the music program, was so unique in this way, in that they really focused us on networking and how important it is. So it was, yes, we had classes that we learned about, history of music and, how the business of music and all this kind of stuff. But really it came down to networking, and it's not who you know, it's who also knows you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that relationship back and forth that they really, made us focus on for a long time. Um, so we had this like internship class, I think it was our junior year. And leading up to it, they basically sent out an email to the class saying, if you don't have an internship, don't bother coming.
No.
So we were all looking at each other like, how do we get an internship? Like, we never heard of this before. We don't know anything
Yeah.
about it. And, that's kind of when they started pressing the networking on us. Like, this is how you figure it out, and use each other, use who you know, use
Right.
family, friends, make a list of everybody you know, and just call people. And that's what we all did. And we all somehow got internships. So yeah, it was very interesting. But yeah, that networking is something I still preach to this day. It's just so incredibly important, and not just like for your own career growth, but also in, like, for me, my day to day was business development and partnerships.
Right.
So I'm constantly working on relationship building and managing relationships. So that was it for me.
Did any of your classmates actually stay in the music business, or did everybody go off and do all kinds of different things?
Um, yeah, there's definitely a mix, a few that stayed in, a few that moved out, and a few that kind of transitioned to those like in between companies that popped up along the way.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a nice mix. And I feel like the university also has, brought us back a couple times to talk about that, which is
Nice.
cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that also means like your success story isn't necessarily, it's not a 1 in a million chance. Like other people who studied something that's not so obvious where they'll end up, they can make it too.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody really looks anymore at, did you study this specific field? Maybe if you're a lawyer, like we were talking about
Sure,
before,
you have to have certain requirements. Yeah.
right. But like if you studied communication or business or something that's a little more vague in general, you can really make that fit anywhere. it's really just coming down to, can you function in the world? And, can you actually figure these things out along the way?
Right. And do you have people in your team who studied all kinds of different things at your current role?
Yeah. So someone on my team, she studied marketing, and others, I don't actually know what they studied. It's really not like a general topic of conversation anymore. But again, like it doesn't really matter as long as you can do the job and you can prove that throughout the interview process.
Right. It's actually, I guess it's so not a topic. You don't even know what people studied, which is actually good news.
That's a great point.
And I wanted to ask you, so regardless though, if you could like do it all over again, so you're just about to enroll for university, would you still do music teaching or music industry, or would you do something completely different? And if yes, why?
I 100% would have started music industry from the start.
Okay.
And I definitely would have stayed with that major. I just think the freedom that I had in that school and that department, we were such a small class, and we kind of all helped each other through everything to the point where we're all still very much connected. So it's something that I really valued, is having that freedom of, creating the classes we really want to take, and, trying to figure out these internships and still make it to class, and just understanding things in a different way where you're not in these massive schools and massive classes was something that was right for me.
Right.
But yeah, I do sometimes wish that I took maybe more like general business courses, or maybe like a legal class or something. Cause I just feel like a lot of my job is almost translating between, the company, the people I work with inside my company right now, to the people that I'm trying to manage relationships outside the company, and back and forth.
Right.
So, understanding those things a little bit more was definitely a learning curve. But again, that's where your jobs along the way help you learn these skills that you pick up.
Of course. Yeah. But so in that case, I mean, you do it all over again, but just maybe take some different courses to, add.
Yeah, I think so. I think I would stick with my major.
That's really great, actually. And so in general, not just for you, but if you think of your ex-classmates, what do you think some of the strongest assets graduates are in music, or that graduates have in music industry to offer potential employers, maybe at your kind of job, but also beyond? Like, what do you think what do they bring to the table?
Well, that's, everybody brings something a little bit unique, which is cool, but that's the music industry really too, is it's very unique in many different ways. And probably one of the hardest industries I've ever worked in. It was really tough. But it just shows that you have to be tough. They always talked about having a thick skin, and how important that was. So we all really had to like build it up and, make sure we could fight through it in a way.
Right.
But yeah, I think that thick skin and having a little bit of persistence really helps everybody kind of move forward and keep moving within that industry.
Right.
But yeah, I also kind of say like having a little bit of impatience too, of like, keep going and keep getting more, because I think if you don't have that, you're just kind of waiting for people to give you things.
Right. Is there, I mean, I'm guessing most people who go into music in any way, they also enjoy playing, writing music in their free time. Is the creative part of it something where you think, oh, that's something I can use in my day-to-day too? And that's something that graduates can definitely use regardless of the employer that they end up working for?
Yeah, I think they should be using creativity in any way. It's, something that not everybody has very well, or has that creative mind, but in some ways everybody is a little bit creative. So I think as much as you can bring that in, that's great. But, even so, just an example, like during the pandemic, we all started working from home, and we're a global company. So a couple of folks in the UK, and then also in San Francisco and New York, they all started doing on Fridays, like almost like a little happy hour concert. So we had no idea all these people played instruments, and they all started, singing and, playing guitar and whatever. And we'd have like little Friday concerts for a couple of weeks.
Oh, that's
so
it's
yeah, it's nice when you could bring it in.
in.
And that's in this industry, not in music.
Yeah. Well, I guess in this industry, you're even more special if you do play an instrument, right? Like,
I guess so.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, it was very cool.
So I was also thinking if maybe you have some book recommendations that you can give people, specifically. I mean, it can be specifically about what to do with your career, but maybe also just something else that inspired you, shows that you watched, or even social accounts to follow for more career advice.
Sure. So for books, I really love the book Creativity Inc.
Mhm.
And it's all about kind of the inner workings of the Disney company. It's amazing, and I just highly recommend it to anybody. And
Okay.
for shows, I'm trying to think. I'm really all about like comedy shows, so I really just stick to like Friends and How I Met Your Mother, and funny little short shows like that.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not super into social media really when it comes to like business accounts and stuff. I'm trying to think. I mean, I follow like the folks on Shark Tank and those kinds of things. I like looking up new businesses. Sarah Blakely from Spanx, I follow her as well. So, I kind of just look at like what businesses are doing that's interesting and, try and follow those people if they have an interesting account.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Cool. So finally, I'd like to wrap up with sort of a take-home message or a main piece of advice that you have for graduates and soon-to-be graduates in your field and maybe also beyond.
Um, I think the biggest piece of advice is like, yes, it is all going to work out. Like everything's going to be fine. I know people used to tell me that all the time. And I was like, yeah, but I need these things now, like everything has to happen now. But I also feel like that bit of impatience really helps you, especially in your 20s, to get where you want to go for when you're in your 30s. Like
Yeah.
it helps push you forward a little bit further. And puts things back in your own control versus again like letting people waiting for people to give you things.
Right.
So working a little extra harder and pushing for that promotion versus waiting because you feel like you should have that promotion by now. So I feel like those things are helpful, but yeah, it's definitely a balance of relax, it'll be okay,
Yeah.
and hurry up and push for more.
Great. Well, on that positive note, thank you very much. Everything we talked about will be linked in the description below, including Jessica's LinkedIn profile, which I strongly encourage you to check out and follow. And then if she has more social accounts and advice and things, you're always up to date. And if you'd like to hear more professionals talk about their not so obvious career paths, be sure to hit that subscribe button. And yeah, thanks for watching and see you next time.
Thank
Bye.
you.